Welcome back to today's story, where we peel back the layers of the darkest corners of the human heart. Can you believe it? A warm family dinner, ending in the cold click of handcuffs. What would you do if you found out your own father was the mastermind who ruined your brother's life? And now, he's using your daughter's life as a bargaining chip to force you to leave the woman you love. Torn between filial piety and the lives of his wife and child, James made a shocking move. He handed his own father a death sentence on a rain-soaked night. What horrifying truth forced Diep to break down and say goodbye? And will justice truly bring peace? Or is it just the start of a tragedy with no way out? Let's dive into these heart-pounding details right now. This story will definitely change the way you think about family. Before we get into the most shocking parts, don't forget, hit like. If you're rooting for James's brand of justice, subscribe and ring the bell so you're the first to see the tear-jerking conclusion of this intense series. Now, brace yourselves. Let's get started. The scene. The sound of chopsticks clinking against porcelain echoed through the kitchen, a dry, hollow noise in a room already suffocated by silence. James sat there, his tall frame casting a long shadow against the stained wall, looking as worn out as a machine running on empty. Diep looked at him, her hand trembling slightly as she scooped some soup. "I'm sorry about what I said last time," she murmured. I lost my cool." James didn't look up. He pushed the plate of roasted duck, her favorite, toward her. "Just eat. I got it from the shop down the street." "It's good," Diep said, with a forced smile. She took a bite, but it felt tough and bitter in her mouth, a perfect reflection of her mood. "You know, while you were gone, things were so dull. Little Nye, she cried all the time. She missed you so much she'd sleep every night clutching your old jacket." James's hand froze. A sharp, haunting look flashed in his tired eyes. It wasn't emotion. It was fear. "How's the business?" James asked, his voice thick and raspy. "It's okay. Thanks to Lynn. He helped me out a lot while you were away." Diep answered honestly, trying to find some kind of connection. The name Lynn dropped into the room like a grenade with the pin pulled. James gripped his chopstick so hard the veins on the back of his hand bulged. Lynn. The man who always seemed to show up the moment James hit rock bottom. Was that help truly selfless? Or was it a trade-off? Diep was hiding under the guise of stability. Lynn's quite the nice guy, isn't he? James smirked, the expression never reaching his eyes. So nice that he even takes care of another man's wife and kid. The air turned heavy. Diep realized something was terribly wrong. James wasn't just tired from work. His coat smelled of cigarette smoke and a strange scent, the smell of a hospital, or perhaps the rot of unspoken lies. "Where have you actually been this whole time?" Diep asked, her voice shaking. "Why did you hang up every time Nee asked for you?" James stood up abruptly, his wooden chair screeching against the floor. He leaned in close to Diep, his hot breath hitting the back of her neck. "You really want to know what I had to do to pay for this duck? Or do you want to know why your good friend Lynn is actually so helpful?" James slammed a stack of crumpled photos onto the table. In the pictures, Diep and Lynn were standing in front of the shop. Lynn's hand rested on her shoulder, and the way they looked at each other was clearly more than just business. But the final photos were even more chilling. They showed James standing in the shadows, watching them with a dagger in his hand. As it turned out, James hadn't gone far at all. He had been right there the whole time, holed up in the old attic across the street, tracking Diep and Lyn's every move. The dullness Diep had felt was actually the silent stalking of a man on the brink of madness. "Where's Nee?" James asked, his voice eerily calm. Diep turned pale. She's sleeping at my mother's house." "Liar," James whispered. "I just drove by your mother's place. The door was deadbolted from the outside." "Where is she, Diep?" Thunder crashed outside as a torrential downpour slammed into the city. Diep suddenly realized the man standing before her wasn't the James she once loved. The pressure of the outside world had crushed his humanity, twisting his love into a sick, possessive obsession. Diep looked down at the plate of roasted duck. It hit her. James always hated the smell of duck. Why would he go out of his way to buy it today? And why, after just a few bites, was her head spinning and her limbs feeling like lead? "Just sleep for a bit," James said, pulling a chair up next to her and tenderly stroking her hair. "When you wake up, we'll be a happy family again, forever. And Lyn will never bother us again." Outside, police sirens wailed through the rain, piercing the heavy silence of a family dinner soaked in blood and tears. Diep's throat felt bone dry. The dizziness from the food wasn't an illusion. She gripped the edge of the table, staring at James, the husband who used to be so gentle now, a jagged, unrecognizable stranger. "Where did you go?" Diep wheezed. "Why are you like this?" James poured himself a glass of white liquor and downed it in one gulp. His gaze pierced the empty air. "You want to know where I went? I went abroad to find Hung. Dad said he went missing, but he didn't. He didn't just vanish. He was being held captive in a black market labor camp because of his debts." James's voice trembled with pure hatred. "When I finally found him, Hung was a hollow shell of a person. His legs were shackled. I had to use every cent of our savings I even had to trade my own blood just to buy his freedom and get him to a safe house. I didn't tell Dad because I knew. Dad didn't deserve to know." Diep was in shock. "How can you say that about your own father? He was so worried about you." "Worried?" James scoffed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Diep, you're so naive. When I was about to bring Hung home, the people running that camp blocked my path. But do you know who gave them my itinerary? Do you know who signed the order to freeze my accounts over there so I couldn't even afford a plane ticket?" James slammed the glass down on the table. Shards of glass sliced into his hand and blood began to ooze out, but he didn't even flinch. It was Dad. He wanted me to stay there forever to cover up the fact that he sold Hung off just to save his failing company. I'm the eldest son, but in his eyes, I'm just a pawn to protect his precious family reputation. A shiver ran down Diep's spine. If what James was saying was true, her entire world had been nothing but a carefully staged play. "So, where have you been all this time?" "I never went far," James whispered in her ear, his breath reeking of liquor and pure malice. "I've been skulking around, hiding on cargo ships, crossing borders like a rat just to get back here. I'm living in a run-down shack just a block away. Every night, I stood on that balcony watching you laugh and talk with Lynn, watching Nye cry for her daddy. Do you have any idea what that feels like? It's like being buried alive while you can hear people walking over your own grave. James stood up and walked toward the kitchen drawer. He pulled out a coil of rope and a key she didn't recognize. Lynn helped you stabilize the business, no. He's been bleeding out the last of my capital. And Dad, he's coming over to visit you and Nye tonight, isn't he? Diep backed away, trembling. James, what are you planning? Don't do anything stupid. Stupid was believing in family, James muttered. I cooked this meal for you because I still love you. But the others, they have to pay. My little place nearby, it's got plenty of room for both Dad and Lynn. Right then, the doorbell rang. One chime, then two. Heavy and ominous. They're here, James said, with a twisted smile. He flicked off the only light in the kitchen, plunging the house into a thick, suffocating darkness. Diep, stay put. Don't make a sound if you ever want to see Nye come back from your mother's house. In the dark, Diep heard James's heavy footsteps heading for the door. She realized she hadn't been drugged. It was the sheer horror of the truth that had paralyzed her. The door creaked open. Her father-in-law's voice drifted in. Diep, I'm here to check on you and the baby. The sentence was cut short by a muffled grunt and the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. Diep clamped her hands over her mouth to stifle a scream. She knew then this wasn't a night for a reunion. It was a night of judgment. Outside, the rain began to pour harder, washing away any trace of the man who had just entered. James stood in the doorway, swallowed by the shadows, his eyes bloodshot and burning with an unquenchable rage. The darkness in the kitchen felt like it was closing in. Diep stood frozen, the spoon slipping from her hand and hitting the floor with a cold metallic clang. You're going to put your father in prison. Diep's voice broke shaky and thin. James, you've lost your mind. No matter what he did, he's still the man who gave you life. You can't be the one to turn in your own father. James whipped around, his eyes flashing under the faint streetlights, peeking through the blinds. He lunged forward, pinning her against the wall. Gave me life, sure, but he also killed me once already across that border. Do you have any idea what it's like to be pushed to the brink by the person you're supposed to trust most? He doesn't see me as a son. He sees me as a commodity, a tool to polish that prestigious family name of his. But I'm trying. Diep screamed through her tears. The business is finally stable. I'm learning how to manage everything. I'm doing all of this so he can see I'm not a burden to you. I just need time. Time. James interrupted with a bitter laugh. Diep, you still don't get it, do you? He's not trying to stop us because you aren't good enough. It's because you're poor. To a man who uses money to decide his own son's fate, like he did your hard work, is nothing but a joke to him. He wants me to marry a partner's daughter just to bail out his empire, an empire that's rotting from the inside out. James gripped Diep's shoulders, his voice dropping to a low, commanding growl. He's not forcing me back overseas to take over the business. He's doing it to keep me under house arrest, so I can't protect you and Nye anymore. Is that what you want? for me to just obey him, for me to walk out on you and leave you to face his schemes all alone. Diep was speechless. She saw a pain in James's eyes so vast it had swallowed every ounce of family loyalty. But in the heart of a traditional woman, the idea of a son testifying against his father was still earth-shattering. "I don't want to lose you," Diep sobbed. "But I don't want my husband to be the man who destroyed his own father either. If you do this, you'll never have a moment of peace for the rest of your life. What will Ly think of her father? Ly will be proud that her father stood for what's right." James roared. "I have enough evidence to prove he conspired with human traffickers to lock Hung up. I have the paper trail for every dirty cent he used for bribes. If I stay silent, I'm an accomplice. Diep you choose. An honest husband, branded as a traitor to his blood, or a coward who serves an evil man until the day he decides to destroy us too." A deathly silence filled the room. The only sound was the rain drumming relentlessly against the tin roof, matching the frantic heartbeats of two people standing at a crossroads of fate. Diep looked down at her hands calloused from working herself to the bone just to be worthy of his family. She realized then that she had been building a castle on sand. Her grace could never soften a heart that had long ago turned to stone for the sake of money. James let go of her shoulders. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket and set it on the table. "This is everything. Tomorrow I either hand this to the police and we start a new life, poor but free, or I burn it, go back overseas like he wants, and we act like we never met." James turned his back and walked toward the door, toward the shack where he had been hiding out. "James," Diep called out. He stopped, but didn't turn around. "Whatever you decide," Diep said, her voice now unnervingly calm. "Ly, and I will be waiting for you. But please, just remember that Ly needs a father, not a ghost consumed by hatred." James didn't answer. He walked straight out into the white veil of the rain. Diep sat down staring at the USB drive like it was a ticking time bomb. She knew that when the sun rose tomorrow, their lives would be changed forever. A family would shatter, but perhaps from the ashes, the truth would be reborn. The reunion dinner ended with half-eaten plates, a cold dish of duck, and a pitch-black future. Justice or blood? The answer no longer lived in words, but in the final actions of a man walking through the night. In that cramped kitchen, Diep's next words fell like a blade severing the last remaining cord. "Maybe we should just break up." James froze. A second ago, he was a warrior, fueled by rage, ready to take on the world. But now, his shoulders slumped. Diep's words weren't just a sentence, they were a total collapse. The word breakup wasn't just an end, it was a rejection of everything he was trying to protect. "What did you just say?" James turned back, his voice cracking with pure disbelief. "You're the one who taught me that everyone makes mistakes," Diep said, looking him dead in the eye. Her tears had dried, replaced by a heartbreaking resolve. "You put him in prison, then what? Do you spend the rest of your life as a hero or as a man whose soul is an orphan? Will you truly be at peace knowing you personally tore out your own roots?" Diep stepped closer, her hand trembling as she touched his heaving chest. "Do you know why I'm so terrified? because I grew up an orphan. I never knew my father's face. I never knew what it felt like to have a man protect me. I craved a father so badly that even if he had beaten me or cast me out, I would have just been grateful he existed. She choked back a sob. Your father might be a monster to you, but he's still your father. I won't let our love, my presence or knees, be the reason you become the man who killed his own family. If being with me turns you into a man consumed by hate, then I'd rather disappear. James stared at her, his expression a chaotic blur of love bitterness and total collapse. He realized that while he was trying to use justice to reclaim their love, Diep was using love to save the last shred of his humanity. Her sacrifice was too much. It made his entire revenge plot feel small, petty, and extreme. I have to, James stammered. He wanted to tell her he was doing this for her, for Nye, for the truth. But looking into her eyes that held a lifetime of quiet endurance, he realized he had no arguments left. I have something I need to take care of. Now. James backed away, stumbling over a wooden chair. He didn't dare look at her face for another second. He knew if he did, he'd fall apart completely. He turned and bolted out the door like a fugitive. The sound of his boots splashing through the puddles echoed frantically before fading into the dark corner of the street. The door slammed shut. Diep stood frozen in the middle of the living room. She looked at the cold plate of duck and the 2 half-finished bowls of rice. The reunion dinner she had waited months for had ended in total ruin. She sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Little Nee was still fast asleep at her grandmother's, completely unaware that her parents' world had just detonated. Diep knew she was right to stop him. If James destroyed his father, he could never hold his daughter with clean hands again. He would see the shadow of betrayal every time he looked at his own family. But being right didn't make it hurt any less. Her heart felt crushed by the reality of her choice to save the soul of the man she loved. She had to push him away forever. Behind the rows of houses in the cramped shack where James had been hiding, he sat slumped on the cold concrete floor. On the table sat the USB drive, the evidence that could ruin his father, and James began to sob. These were the tears of a man who had tasted the full bitterness of betrayal and poverty. Diep's words rang in his ears like a funeral bell. If being with me turns you into a man consumed by hate, then I'd rather disappear. He picked up the USB drive, then set it back down. Outside, lightning ripped through the sky. Diep's sacrifice felt like a poison that doubled as a wake-up call. She had used the pain of her own orphanhood to teach him the value of family, the very thing he was ready to burn to the ground for revenge. Dawn approached. The rain had slowed to a steady drip from the eaves. Diep hadn't slept a wink. She began packing her things and Nye's clothes. She had promised to walk away, and she would follow through to set James free. Suddenly, there was a soft knock at the door. Not the frantic ringing of a bell, not the violent pounding of rage. Just a steady, hesitant rhythm. Diep stood up, her heart racing. She opened the door. James was standing there, soaking wet and haggard, but the crazed look of vengeance had vanished from his eyes. The USB drive was gone. The evidence was gone. The cold edge of an assassin was gone. He just looked at her, his voice raspy. Is she awake yet? Diep didn't answer. She just stared at the man she loved. They didn't know if his father would come for them tomorrow or if the family storm would ever truly pass. But in that moment, they realized sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook for their sins. It's about saving yourself from the edge of the abyss. James stepped away from the house, but he didn't go far. He ducked into the shadows of the narrow alley across the street, watching through the window as Diep collapsed onto the floor. His heart wrenched. A thought struck him. Diep was a strong woman. She had waited years for him. Why would she suddenly demand a breakup now? He remembered Diep's phone on the table earlier. It had buzzed once while they were eating, and she had turned ghost white. He went back, but he didn't knock. He circled to the back. Through the kitchen window, he saw Diep clutching her phone, her hands shaking violently. The speakerphone was on, and the voice coming through was the low, chilling tone of his father. Did you tell him good? Remember, if you don't leave him, or if he dares breathe a word to the police, it won't just be your business that vanishes. Little Ly will never make it home from school. James's blood turned to fire. He saw it all now. Diep's sacrifice wasn't about his soul or his morality. She was being blackmailed with their daughter's life. James didn't go inside to confront her. If he did, she would just beg him to stop out of fear. He had to end this nightmare himself like a man. He went back to his shack and grabbed the USB drive along with a thick folder. It didn't just contain the trafficking evidence. It held records of every black market transaction James had quietly tracked while he was abroad. You want to play by jungle rules, Dad? James hissed through gritted teeth. Fine, we'll go to hell together. James picked up his phone and called Lynn, the man he had envied only hours ago. Lynn, I know you care for Diep. If you actually give a damn about her, go get her and Ly right now. Take them somewhere safe. I'm ending this tonight. Don't ask questions, just do it. 300 a.m. Torrential rain. James hopped on his old motorcycle and tore through the main gates of the luxury villa where his father lived. His brakes screeched bone deep against the marble driveway, the kingpin. James's father was sitting in the living room sipping a glass of wine as if he'd been expecting this. So you're back, he said without looking up. Did you break it off with that low-class girl? If so, get in here. I've already got your ticket for a flight to Germany tomorrow morning. James slammed the USB drive onto the table, splashing the red wine across the surface like fresh blood. You've got it all wrong. I didn't come here to go to Germany. I came here to send you to prison. His father let out a booming laugh full of contempt. You think you have proof. You think a few scraps of paper can take me down. You've forgotten who made you, who raised you. You didn't make me. You just created an enemy. James roared. I sent copies of everything to international investigators and the local precinct an hour ago. Tonight, I'm not the only one coming for you. There's an arrest warrant with your name on it. His father's face suddenly went pale. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. You bastard. Aren't you worried about your daughter? With one word from me, that little girl will eat. You're too late. James said, stepping forward and grabbing the collar of the man he once worshipped. Lynn already got Diep and Ly out. I've had the police tailing your goons for weeks. You don't have any cards left to play." At that moment, the wail of police sirens drifted in from the distance, piercing the silence of the luxury estate. Red and blue lights began to flash against the cold marble walls. The old man slumped into his leather chair. For the first time in his life, James saw him for what he was: small and pathetic. The power, the money, and the arrogance had all crumbled beneath the feet of the son he had treated like a pawn. "Why?" he wheezed. "I did everything to save this empire for you." "You did everything for your own ego," James said coldly. "An empire built on my brother's blood and threats against my wife and child isn't something I want." The police swarmed in. The cold click of handcuffs snapped onto the wrists of the powerful man. James stood still, watching his father's back as he was led away. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a sadness as vast as the ocean. He had saved Diep. He had saved Ly, but he had lost his father forever. The next morning, at a small beach house, far from the city, Diep sat, clutching me, her eyes swollen from crying all night. She heard a car pull into the driveway. She sprinted to the door. James was standing there, his face bruised and his clothes stained. But his eyes were bright in the early morning sun. He didn't say a word. He just opened his arms. Diep threw herself into his embrace, sobbing. "What did you do? Are you okay? I was so scared." "It's over, Diep," James said, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of peace. "From now on, no one can threaten our family. We're starting over. No more of his money, no more of his rules. Just you, me, and Ly." Ni ran out, wrapping her arms around both of their legs. The sunrise stretched across the surface of the sea, washing away the remnants of a night of horror. James knew the road ahead would be tough, but this time he was never letting go. Channel outro. And that is how the nightmare finally ended. A son chose truth over blood, and a mother chose courage over fear. It's a reminder that a real family isn't built on money or status. It's built on the lengths we are willing to go to protect the ones we love. What did you think of James's final move? Was he right to turn in his father to save his future? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved, you please give us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest corners of the human heart. Until next time, that was an intense conclusion. Is there any other part of this story you'd like to refine, or would you like to start a brand new script?
Mày mở tầm 30 giây được không?